Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Shortcut. I am Jack. This is Greg. What's up?
I'm Greg. What's going on? Calling in from sunny East Coast. Actually, it's the exact
Yep.
opposite. It's your typical East Coast winter weather of super gray skies and all of that. But I have a sunny disposition today, if that counts for anything.
That's lovely.
And it's because, yeah, and it's because, well, one, we're doing our podcast, which always puts me in a good mood. But number two, I think it's because like our topic today is, something that we've been kind of like drawing the line around for like the whole year in some ways. And I think today is like the first time we'll really get to like dig into, this shift in marketing that's happening in a much like broader sense. So I'm really excited about that, and I think it comes at a really interesting time, as a lot of people who listen to this show probably know. We stay really, really close to content marketing communities and groups. We're in a bunch of them. Even our product team is in a lot of these communities. We really try to stay close with what content marketers are sort of up to and facing. And I gotta say, like, if there is one sort of trend or one sort of like 2024, should we add this to the strategy doc? Should we make a hard pivot to incorporate this? I mean, that thing is like, how are we going to use creators next year in our marketing strategy, and specifically like our content marketing strategy? I think like I'm trying to think of like the best place to begin for this, and I'm wondering, Jack, if we maybe start by like defining like what it is we're kind of seeing in these communities first. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I would say I think I don't know, there's sort of this collective consciousness that I've been seeing of people understanding that, like B2B companies who probably once were, I mean, I'll call a spade a spade. To me, a lot of the content and marketing efforts were kind of like boring and more so, highly professional and highly branded
Very
and
playbook.
not
Yeah.
super personal. Yes.
Yeah.
Sort of are outdated strategies. And that, we are starting to see success in getting, putting out more personalized or personal content. And I think we can see this, like my head goes straight to all this, founder content that you see these days. People have like cracked the code on that at this point. Like, the founder can be a great way to get people in the door to your product because it's a personal story or they're an expert in the field and they have interesting things to say. And now I think people, upon seeing that and understanding that that's like a viable marketing option, are now starting to sit there and be like, wait, there's so many other people in our organizations who can do that for us. Or we have so many like affiliates or influencers even out there now who specialize in like B2B content, and sort of starting to figure out like people still care about, like, even though people are marketers or B2B entrepreneurs or employees or things like that, like ultimately from the content they want, it's still personal, highly personal. And and so I think like now everyone's starting to get that, sort of this creator go-to-market B2B marketing, B2B influencers era is among us.
Yeah.
And wondering how do we make use of that early before everyone else does.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's exactly right. And yeah, I mean, spoilers, like, I mean, the way we're describing this, I think you described it perfectly in terms of it's this like, it's the zeitgeist. It's the thing that everyone is seeing, observing, talking about in Slack groups and communities, but we haven't really, maybe put a name to this just yet. I mean, the way that we would describe it, or like, I would put it this way, a term that we're trying out. We're trying it on for size. We're not committed to it just yet, but we're trying it out, is thinking of this whole, yes, person first, creator first approach to marketing is like creator go to market, or like Creator GTM to kind of shorten it. And I do think it's like, There are a couple things that I think sort of got us here. Like, why are marketers now really interested in this, and especially in B2B? I think an oversimplification, though, could be one, like marketing is just the task, the job of connecting customers to products. And so a lot of like the existing digital channels we've kind of relied on over the years. I mean, we've covered this in some detail in the past. They're getting squeezed a bit, or at least some channels feel a bit squeezed for new players kind of entering the space. Again, SEO, paid, you're usually going up against pretty established competitors when you get into those channels nowadays. Doesn't mean that they're not viable. It just means it's a lot harder. And then you add to that, like most people in their personal lives now, yes, even those of us over 30, over 35, we can name creators offhand that we follow. Whereas before, you might have maybe known like a news broadcaster or somebody by name, or a radio DJ by name or something like that. But mostly you were getting your news and entertainment and so on, through some sort of like publication, some sort of like media brand. Whereas like nowadays, like I have a whole, bunch of interest. That I actually have like specific people I follow on. And
Yeah.
I think it took a little while for B2B, so to speak, like professional creators, I would say, or work focused creators to catch on, because that is a little bit more counterintuitive, that you would follow someone, to get better at your career or to get better at something that affects your work, versus just, your travel. Who are some of the first people on the scene, like your travel influencers or mom blogs for new mothers and other things that are way more sort of like personal, or like hobby and niche interest kind of creators and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I think it ultimately, like, we were destined to kind of wind up here. Like, of course, people care about, growing in their professional discipline, their career. And then there are people out there that are ready, that sort of were there to meet the demand for that. And so I think now we've run into this interesting situation of like, people have noticed that and brands have noticed that, and they sort of say, how can we build up our audience in that same way? And if not that, or maybe in addition to that, like, how can we tap into these people that are a little bit ahead of the curve and have already built up audiences in these spaces, that already have kind of like built the audience that we would love to have for our product. And, that lands us to the messy reality of like 2024, which is like, everyone's talking about it. Not a lot of people have clear answers, because we're all, I think, in the midst of like figuring it out, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something you can tell, like, just from vibes, sort of like we're getting at, but I think there's also like data behind it. Like, we've been talking about this for weeks, where like sort of the, traditional marketing methods that used to work sometimes aren't working anymore. Like, like paid ads aren't always getting the same return that they might have, or just like straight up, SEO and resources like aren't always attracting people in the same way. And so I think like there is data behind like, okay, something's wrong. And then on the other side, like, well, who's taking this market share? It is creators, it's personal stories, things like that. And I think some companies are like slower to figure that out, that like for a long time, I think sort of like faceless marketing was working, and now like a lot of times it's not working as much. Like, when you look at a lot of websites or landing pages, you might see a video on the, or a face or a GIF of someone on the landing page. And now if you look at people's social media, it's usually the social media manager's face is on there rather than just like graphics. Paid ads now are usually human forward even. And so it's like, okay, the new era is here. Jump on, because this is the way.
Yeah, I think like when things are being pitched as new, I always like to go back to like what hasn't changed. And I would say in this case, like what hasn't changed is just like whenever there's a change in kind of like customer behavior, there's always like a business change following in its wake. Businesses usually follow customer behavior. And so I think The customer behavior change, the consumer behavior change, if you prefer that, is just that they're engaging more with individual accounts across all areas.
Right.
Like call them creators, call them influencers, pick your label. But I think that change is just people are connecting with and following individuals more frequently. So what do businesses do? They're now, again, they're in this process, the midst of figuring out, well, if the attention is going that way, how do we get in front of that? I mean, from the earliest days of like billboards and print ads and things like this, like you just go where the intention is. So we're following attention, and I think that's like the big that maybe is like the simplest way to explain like why are people so interested in this.
Right.
And I think I think it's helpful to try out this term mostly just to capture like what you said, like capture what is going on, to have just like a quick shorthand label for this change. And so we're going with Creator GTM, and I think like today we wanted to walk through like a couple early beliefs that we have about this, like where things are headed and how we have seen teams approach this, how we have approached this absolutely ourselves, and maybe actually put our voice out there for some things we've seen that we don't entirely agree with too. But I will add the caveat of just like I think it's very early days. I think we lack for your sort of like really tangible case study, because a lot of brands are still, if they're not getting the like content itself or the program itself off the ground, they actually need more time to collect the data on like the performance of this kind of approach. So I think we're very early days to B2B, and I would just add that caveat that like it's all kind of crystal ball predictions, I would say, at the moment. And I will say, like, to start, one that I've seen, I think I've seen people fall on either side of the fence more so than like agree or disagree with this. But I would say like one of our beliefs is that, this creator go-to-market will involve both like in-house and external creators. I think it will depend on the business and depend on like the team's capabilities, and honestly the competitive like landscape too, in terms of like which is best or which is like the one you should invest more time in. But I do think that like both will play a role, and it's not really this one or the other. So I think like my first impressions, and Jack, I would love to hand this over to you on maybe the external creator side, what you could see working well. But for me, I feel like internal creators, that's an approach where you will have to operate on kind of a longer timeline. You're going to have to, unless you've kind of like hired someone who already had this following, has already been doing this for some time, and they happen to just like they've happened to have built an audience like already in the space that your product operates. If you want to build someone from the ground up in-house, like a founder or a CEO, you need to operate on a longer timeline. It's going to take a little bit of time. You can't really shortcut it with like audience building in really any case. I also think though that the payoff for having an internal creator, on staff, that is sort of, building and engaging with this audience like every day, is that they are actually like probably a better channel, a better platform, so to speak, when you really need to take a product to market via like a launch or something like that. Or if you have something kind of more like company centric to promote, like a company event or something like that, or sharing frankly just the company's point of view, like this is how we view the world, our product is built around this point of view. It just is, it's way better having that come from someone in-house. So I think that that's kind of like my high level, that's kind of the pros cons for internal creator. Like that's what they get you, but prepare to invest like more time probably to make that work. And I would say like any first thoughts from you on like the other side of that table, like the external creators and kind of the pros and cons there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a place for it. I think obviously the pros of having an external creator is that, like you can sort of skip a lot of times all of the audience building or audience seeking or trying to get them to seek you out. And like, ideally, there are tools you can use now to find out exactly which influencers or creators have pretty much the exact match of your ideal customer, and so you can sort of skip all of that work and pay kind of a premium to get right in front of them. I think obviously, yeah, that's a con. It's probably more expensive sometimes to do that if you're doing something like sponsorships, which also makes me feel though that like, you know, affiliate marketing could even see a much larger rise. But you know, like affiliate marketing with really like quite high rates where they're making a good payoff for promoting things themselves.
Yeah.
And I could even see like, yeah, like longer partnerships being more frequent where like, you know, maybe you would have one or two or maybe a few of like your pinnacle creators sort of working really closely with them. And they're like, they don't work in-house, but they work closely. And you like support them very just, I don't know, you like manage them almost with a lot of support, because I think you know, if you're afraid of spending a bunch of money in one go, you could like rather build these relationships with people and then just, you know, grow as they grow and sort of have that type of partnership, which I think could be really useful. And yeah, I mean, I also think it's like you said, I think the cons of external creators, if they're not like ingrained in sort of the culture of your product, it's harder for them to tell the story that like you want the world to know.
Yeah. Yes.
Unless it's like a highly scripted, high budget thing, you know, you're gonna have to sort of be okay with like less of that, like, I don't know, less of your messaging being exactly right, or things like that. So I think that's a con as well. But yeah, but I think also like you can get your product in front of way more people, the exact people you want. So, you know, of course there's going to be some cons when you're getting like such a huge pro like that.
I agree. I think like in B2B, I would say I've actually felt this where I've seen something, I've read something from someone and I'm only 2 sentences in, or I'm 5 seconds into the video and I'm like, okay, where's the sponsorship? Like I can actually see the sponsorship coming, because I can tell that it's either overly scripted or, you know, because actually a weird way that like that these parasocial or sort of like longer term audience relationships might, quote unquote, like I don't want to say work against you, but really have to be factored in, is like I actually do know this person pretty well, like in terms of their experience, because they've shared what their experience is. I know what, like, for instance, their work history is. And then they come in with this like sponsored post that it's like, I can just tell immediately, like, no, that's not what you think exactly, or that, you know, this is something that was kind of spoon fed to you, because I know your background. Like, I know that this isn't you. So that's something that can, you know, I think really needs to be managed well. And I would say like one maybe pro for external creators that we've seen, you know, really come from the world of like traditional like influencers slash celebrities. Like celebrities really, I think, being just sort of like a mainstream influencer is really what I would describe them as, is you can dial up and down external creator partnerships like much more quickly. Like if you have a major sort of awareness campaign or sort of brand campaign that you'd like to just like really dial up the reach on, external creators are somebody you can reach out to for like a limited time span. Yeah. Yep. Honestly, a perfect
like Snoop,
like celebrity. Yes. A perfect celebrity example here. Like, so Snoop Dogg, for those who didn't see this, it was genius and hilarious. He sort of pre-announced that he was quitting smoke and gave no additional context after that. And so obviously everyone made the same assumption. And then I think maybe a week later, he comes back and says, actually, it's just smokeless grills that I'm giving up. And it ended up being a sponsorship with this company, Solo Stove, I believe they're called. But this is the kind of thing, like, you know, your internal creators, for instance, they can't just like turn off their creating. They can't like stop audience building for 3 months. They've got to sort of keep it always on. Whereas like for external creators, they're going to do that too, but your brand can kind of tap their audience at like a pivotal time, like during a campaign, and then not have to basically worry about what they're doing the rest of the time. So I think that's something to consider too, is like if you're in the creator life, you know, there's kind of like no days off. And I think for brands, they still will want that freedom to just like, oh, let's just let's just work with these creators at a key moment in time, and then we can dial it back a little bit afterwards, you know?
Totally. Yeah, the only thing I would like warn about that is that like obviously for this example we just showed of Snoop Dogg, like the humor is still really there. I think like a lot of times brands will just like throw money at creators just to get like their like based on their impressions number or whatever.
Very true.
And I think it's important, like when you are finding an influencer or something like that, or a creator or whatever, to allow them or encourage them or come to the table even yourself with like ideas that are humorous or that are personal or that feel real or that feel aligned, because otherwise, yeah, like you said, like you can tell what a bad sponsorship ad is immediately, and it never feels good. So just do a little of that work, I think.
A lot of bad marketing can trace back to like we never asked any customers, and also we thought it was going to be just add water. And I think that the influencer / creator approach is very susceptible to that second one, especially of like, if we just add an audience and give the rest of it no thought, and it's a big number, we'll be good. And that has like blown up, I think, in a lot of people's faces. So definitely one to watch.
Totally.
Cool. I would say kind of related to that point is like, I think what we've seen, at least the discussions we've seen crop up more and more, is around this idea of like in-house or employee advocacy, sometimes a term that's used, or just like employee creators, so on and so on. I think of all the sort of opinions on like where does creator-based marketing head from here, I think I've seen opinions come across a little bit too strong in this point of view. I actually saw a post the other day that I commented on where this consultant, I believe this was a previous co-founder of Morning Brew, great company, great newsletters, say that, you know, they heard that there's this company that's trying to make basically every single employee an influencer, you know, whatever that word means in that context. But I really don't think that this will come to pass. Like, I don't think that this is true. I think that there will be a very, very small set of companies for which this is true. Basically, companies that are started by founders that they're all in on this approach, and it's from day one, the hiring takes into account like how much of an advocate can you be personally on your personal profiles. Are you willing to work with our marketing team to do this? Are you willing to just take some of this on yourself? But I think it will be like extremely niche to do it this way. I'm just having a hard time like imagining your sort of like blasé like e-commerce company or retail company requiring everyone to be like an influencer. And some people might say that that's like a not so generous reading of like this opinion, but I mean, it does say like, I believe every company will operate this way. And I think sometimes people in tech sometimes forget that there's companies outside of like tech too, like
every
traditional
company.
companies. I just don't know if your local HVAC guy is going to be doing this, you know? So I will say though, I was glad that I appreciate Alex for sparking this convo. It's better to have an interesting opinion that drives conversation than like the most neutral blasé take. So I appreciate that. And I weighed in on this on LinkedIn, and I actually got a really great response from this content lead at the company called Doc, Eric Doherty, that really actually sums up like most of what I believe too. And so I want to give Eric that shout. But basically where I see things like where I see the most common play happening is people, you know, finding and very much like cherry picking and really coming up with a small set of like subject matter experts within the company that they then, if you want to say train, I would say more so like enable, that they enable to be successful as like creators, right? So where I've actually seen this play out, these are like real actual examples here, are like number one, a sales rep that is like so tuned in to the industry and the product and the market and has that really awesome extroverted personality, just like they're interesting and entertaining. I've seen SDRs turn into sort of like these quasi creators for companies. I've seen folks in customer success or in sort of traditional like product evangelism roles kind of just broaden their set of responsibilities and turn into creators. And certainly like we've seen, you know, on the executive side, like again, very, very popular for like founders to play that role too. And then I think like, you know, as a complement to that, companies will from time to time actually go out and like hire an in-house creator. So this would be someone who's like on a strong trajectory of like they've built up a decent fledgling audience. They're really like they're poised to become a sort of big creator. And then they just hire those folks in lieu of maybe hiring a traditional like social media manager or content marketing manager. And perhaps their like job title might actually still be that, but they will act much more like a creator. So the company will be comfortable, for instance, like saying, hey, you know what? You came up with a bunch of great content concepts. Don't post them to the brand account. You post them. And as long as like you're building the audience that we need for the product, like we're comfortable in having the content actually go out through you and through your account. And then I would say the like we kind of touched on this briefly, but I would just reinforce like I do think execs and founders are a really, really great place to start. I think that'll be kind of the third pillar. If you say like cherry picking your occasional subject matter expert, in-house creators, and then again, like the execs and founder types, they have a really, really strong incentive to see the company do well for number one. But number two, they're also a great vehicle for some of your like most pointed, most sharp kind of point of view thought leadership content, if you want to call it that, right? I mean, there's like, what better place for like, where is the world headed kind of opinion to come from than like the founder who literally built the company on that belief, right? So
completely
those three groups of people, way smaller, you know, way more precise, I think offer like much more bang for your buck than like you show up at the next company on site and it's all about like creator training or like how to maximize engagement on Twitter or something, you know? So I expect things to play out a little bit differently than that.
I think people also forget that like not everyone wants to do that. You know, like you can
absolutely
find the people that do want to do that and hire them or train them. But I think like imagining a world where everyone is a creator is a little dystopian. And I don't know. It doesn't sound. It also sounds like it'd be like way too much noise on social media anyway. Like people would get tired of it and probably find another on to the next thing because everyone's like everything's so B2B now. So
and I think I think a couple of the comments that I did see disagreeing with that stance, not a lot of them offered like alternatives, which is why I tried to walk through, I think what we and it sounds like Eric Doherty also believe, like how things will play out. I will say one of the arguments that I saw in contrast though were sort of like, you have to like let people be exceptional at their stated job. Like we'll get into the risks of this approach a little bit more down like later on in this convo, but some people are strictly valuable just being valuable at their stated job. I mean, to add this like additional layer of responsibility on top of that really kind of undersells like how hard it is to create interesting content. You know, it's kind of like I have faced pushback in the past for ideas like lots of people in the company should try their hand at doing customer support because I think there's a lot to learn from doing that. And I've had people tell me that like, hey, if you state that the wrong way, if you state that too pointedly, it makes it sound like support is some like simple job that just like anyone can step in and do. And like, obviously that's not true. You actually, like if you were going to have some kind of program to help more employees maybe get some support FaceTime or more FaceTime with customers, they should have guidance and they should have guardrails because your support team is like way better equipped to actually deal with a real support request or serious request, right? And if you believe that, or if you believe like your marketing team shouldn't be, writing the all of the code in the core product and so on and so on, like, then why would you believe some random person should be creating marketing content? Like, there really is like a small set of people who are, uniquely suited to do this. And I think it becomes way more about finding those people than trying to make people better at this. You know what I mean? I think it's more about like facilitating the people that are already naturally good at it, rather than some kind of like arduous training program to sort of like make it work. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think, as per usual, people on LinkedIn saying crazy things for engagement farming.
It keeps it interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like, I salute people who keep social media interesting though. I love it. And I think like that's a good segue maybe for like a third belief that we've had, or that we have, and I have discussed a little bit with a buddy of mine, Alex, who runs this content consultancy, Omniscient, which is that there are a lot of hurdles to this approach that are not being kind of like as discussed as like the opportunities. Like, we're spending way more time as content marketers talking about the opportunities, which is awesome and cool and helps us really figure out whether or not this like approach has legs. But I had a chat with Alex, and I really think like we're underselling, or we're just like not surfacing all of the hurdles that I know teams are going to run into, because I've either run into them personally, or I've like heard of other companies and other marketing teams running into this. And I would say to start, like, let's say the simplest one first, which is just that like this is extremely a creator kind of centric strategy to marketing, and especially like content marketing is just extremely hard to pull off. And this goes beyond like your kind of like brand risks and stuff, which we'll touch on. It's just hard to organize. It's hard to plan.
Yeah.
You have way more moving parts. I mean, that has been kind of a theme in content marketing generally. So I think we're all sort of building that experience and building that muscle more so. But this is like the furthest thing beyond set up a simple editorial calendar and publish blogs twice a week, like of the olden days. Like, this is so much more complicated. You need to wrangle all of these different accounts. Measurement is way trickier. You have different accounts that can have different goals, which we can get into, which is like maybe this creator that we work with, they're trying to reach this ICP, or they're really trying to reach people at the top of the funnel, the earliest in the customer journey. And then our CEO, our founder, is going to talk about these points and try to reach these people. It's quite complicated, let alone getting the buy-in to do this, which is like very hard for marketing teams where you don't have someone very senior who believes that this is worth doing. So like, let's start with just that. This is really hard to pull off. I don't expect a lot of people to be successful with this. I think it'll be one of those things that's like, winners take most, like outsized results will go to the companies that really get it right. And then most people will not get it right, Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's so easy to say, let's have our whole marketing team or whatever post on LinkedIn every day. But like, how are you going to make that happen? And you need, I think people like neglect all of the working parts, especially because, oftentimes I feel like with companies, there are stricter rules in terms of like messaging and whatever. Like, do you need people to sign off on all of your posts? Do you have time to write it at work? Are you brainstorming at work? Like, I think in some ways, like if companies are going to go for this, you have to, be willing to like sacrifice other aspects of marketing. In a way.
There's a time and money and opportunity cost. Absolutely. I will say though that like, at the very start of the year, when I joined, like, if you were to tell me, we would have our CEO's account posting videos 2 to 3 times a week, I would have been like, how? Like, how are we going to pull off that miracle? And then we found that like, with the right perspective and encouragement and finding a process that like worked for us, like we did make that piece of the puzzle work. So for those of you listening and saying, well, are you, I want to hear
Well, I
Jack's
was gonna
maybe
say,
like
but it was
asterisk.
not without
It's challenges.
trial and
Yeah.
tribulation. Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
even us, like so many working parts, we've come into challenges and at pretty much all angles of this. I feel like
Yeah.
I don't know, I'll air out our the issues that we've had, but like
Yeah.
you know, there is a financial cost to like renting out space, and not everyone wanted to do that to make a beauty, you know, have a beauty set, and also to take up like practically an entire day of our CEO's time. Like there's
Mhm.
opportunity cost there. And in terms of editing, you know, we like decided to batch shoot, and I edit this stuff, but then once I've done editing, like I'm not a writer really, so then we need to hand it off to the writing person to get that done, and then scheduling becomes its own thing, and like there's
Yeah.
like pretty much at every turn. And I think we finally, I mean, we've probably been doing this for like 6 months now, and like finally I think we are like
It feels. Yeah.
maintaining more of our rhythm. But it
Mhm.
took a lot of time to like figure out how to smooth out like all the bottlenecks that we were
Yep.
facing. And so I think
Yep.
I would also just say that that's a risk as well. Like, and
Yeah.
like it's not easy.
I agree, and it's like that. It's one of the reasons I'm so excited to be hands on with it, though, is because like we're able to speak to not the dreamy theoretical like scenario of this approach working. Like we're already sleeves rolled and like into the mix, and we can tell you like what the challenges and like shortcomings of it are too. So yeah, I would
Yeah.
say like there will be sort of like for teams like ours, I think that are a little bit early to this approach, like I think I do see it as kind of a responsibility to share some like real talk about like what is and really isn't working, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
armchair kind of theorizing about how nice this would be, or there's sort of like the same examples trotted out like kind of ad nauseum of teams where I think like the whole company is small enough to be like bought into the idea. So I think, for example, like if I were a content leader landing into a company, and this was being discussed maybe as part of the hiring process or part of like the aspirations for the job, I would really take a hard look about like where things stand like currently, because I think it would be incredibly hard to sort of do a full 180 of like turning a company into like everyone's posting kind of an approach versus
Yeah.
like, could you help us figure things out for our founder CEO as part of our broader content strategy? Much more
Yeah.
achievable. I think there will be many more sort of like playbooks for that, many more lessons learned for that versus other tacks, which I think will be way more niche. So I think folks should, you know, in their careers, look out for like what's really being asked and know that, yeah, I think from our experience, like it's a lot of work just getting one person's presence to work consistently,
Yeah.
you know, let alone your whole company doing this in a really exceptional way. So
Yeah. I would say start small, or at least, yeah, just, and give some time to figure it out. Like don't give up, you know, within the first 3 months if you're having bottlenecks, like just try and figure them out. And
yeah,
but it is tough. I think it's harder than like what a lot of people would even imagine, because in your head it seems so easy to be like, well, we'll all just post every day on LinkedIn, but like it's
yeah,
not, it's
yeah,
really not that easy. But I think that's why, what probably makes it such a important and like viable option for the future of marketing, is because it's not easy. And like you
yeah,
said, like only a few, not only a few, but you know, the vast majority of people who or companies who try it aren't going to succeed because it's tough. And
hmm
yeah, it's just one of those things that you have to kind of trudge through the mud on until, you know, you figure it out.
yep. I 100% agree. And I think like some of the other things that go under discussed, I would say, and this is where Alex and I really, I think, kind of jammed, is like there are kind of like these under the waterline risks that brands haven't encountered yet, because they they've mostly been talking about this approach in the abstract. Whereas like as team, as myself and as a team who's kind of like tried this out, we see some risks like in much clearer view, I think. I mean, one of the risks that I've seen mostly play out for like other companies, because we stay so close to this, is like success like with a creator, a star creator, actually leads to like many ways that they could kind of like exit. And that exit might be like they get big enough to go solo as a creator. I mean, that would be like the graduation that you would expect of a creator that's like really, really big. Like very few probably make it again to that kind of like level, but it's kind of interesting that like success would naturally lead to this like really undesirable end state for the company, which is that like this person's now big enough to go solo and just be like a full-time creator potentially. I do think though that like there is a sort of version of this risk that happens like well before that, which is you build up maybe this person internally, or you enable them with a lot of like resourcing, and you don't diversify, and then they leave, right? And then they kind of take this audience like with them, so to speak. And I think I brought this up in my call with Alex, but I don't think it addresses the concern entirely. I would say though that like that old saying of like, what happens if we train people and they leave? And the counter to that is this like executive saying, well, what happens if we don't train people and they stay? The meaning behind that being like, if you don't invest in people, that's not good either. Like you should invest in people to make things work. And so like, for instance, like let's say an SDR builds up this big audience for your sales product, your sales software. And they bring in a lot of leads and a lot of awareness by doing that. And eventually they leave. Yes, it's painful to lose the audience that they've built up, but you wouldn't have had it in the first place if they hadn't been successful, right? I think it's a false equivalency to be like, oh, we could have just done that exact same thing through our brand account, which we owned. I think in a lot of cases, you're dreaming. Like the reason they got so far, the reason they ran so far with this like audience building that they were doing is really rooted in like who they are, that they are entertaining, they are insightful, they are great on camera, they are really attuned to the market and know how to turn that into content ideas. Like I really just do think it's like it's kind of a dream to say like, oh, we could have just done that through the brand account. Like if it were that easy, then there would be no need for creators and marketing in the first place. And it kind of seems like that's not where things are necessarily headed. So that's one thing to consider. But hey, there's real risk. You kind of go all in on a single personality, a single person, whether they're external or in-house, and then they leave, or they just decide to stop working with you or that product or whatever, or they grow beyond their initial audience into something else. Like there's a lot of different ways that they could kind of change their beat, right? And then you would kind of be caught off guard if that happened, and you would be in some trouble. So I think like diversifying your approach with like, let's not have just one account be the one that matters, unless maybe it's like our founder, or let's like kind of complement our in-house creators with some external creators that we work with. It's going to be important to diversify once you get a little bit of traction with this, I think,
Yeah, that's really interesting. I had not considered that actually.
Yeah. And I think the last one is kind of like, I think it's kind of existed since the beginning of like sponsorships, right? But I think it's worth mentioning. I just mentioned it last because it's kind of old news. But what happens when the person themselves or the brand does something that reflects poorly on their partner? Because it can go both ways, right? Like the celebrity endorsements going awry. Like I think we've all seen that 100,000 times.
Like, Pepsi and Kendall Jenner.
So many. Like there's so many, like we made them the face of this and that and the other, and then they do something that doesn't land well, or even worse, and then like now our association with them is really bad. But it can go the other way. It's like you could end up being this like really genuine above the board creator who that you play it right and you do things the honest way. And then through some sort of like, bad sponsorship, this company kind of ends up attracting a ton of negative press. And now you have kind of signed on to be a very sort of vocal voice or even the face of like this company that you've been working with. And now you're in some hot water too. And that could, yes, you could say like, well, you should have vetted them better, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, there are a lot of companies where you don't know the dirt until the dirt comes out later. So both parties really enter a risk here just being associated with each other, right? And now you've kind of introduced this like other way that this can happen, which is like an ex-employee that built up a ton of awareness for the brand and has a big audience. They end up kind of acting strange or saying some things that get them in hot water. And you kind of worry about like, what about our association with them? And I do think I think we have like not maybe really seen that yet. I think that's more of like, I'm describing this thing that could happen versus like, I've seen it a bunch of times. I think a lot of people are probably overly worried about stuff like that. I don't think this is going to be some major hurdle for this, approach or this sort of like investment in creators. I don't think it should stop people, but it's a big world out there. I think there will be sort of at least one example in the future of this blowing up in a big way. And I hope that people don't take the one example as like evidence that like, well, we should never do this. But, law of large numbers kind of thing in a big enough world. There's always going to be one example of something going extremely awry. And I think that's right. We're waiting for that first one to drop. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but then again, like, do you see, companies stop using celebrities for like Super Bowl ads, like
in full?
So
it's back the next year.
We'll get past it. Yeah.
Yep.
One bad thing does not spoil the bunch.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, I think this is random, but also like the interesting thing that I start thinking about is creators sort of like likeness rights with companies. Like I know like especially actors have been thinking about this a lot too. That's why like the SAG actors were on strike, was because they were, certain production companies were trying to get actors to like sign away or waive their rights to their likeness so that AI like one day could, use their likeness and just like dub their voice and use them in every movie without actually paying them. And like that is, it's not knocking on our door right now, but like I could see that becoming a hot legal issue one day in the future.
Yeah, I think that is really interesting, and it is wild to be reminded that we're in a world where you actually have to maybe think about that at least a little, or like we're far enough along that like, daydreaming about what the issues could be is like not unreasonable. I would say that like I think with like B2B creators, the risk of like using someone's likeness with them not being in full support is more so on the company's side than it is on the creator's side. Because if a creator truly has a connection with their audience, even if it's a small audience, like all it's going to take is like, hey, that podcast you've been watching / listening to, like that's not me, and it hasn't been for 3 months. Like I just think that does not play well for the companies that are trying to like for some reason falsify that the person is still there. So I could maybe see some avenues where this, maybe companies are still tempted to do that, like to basically use a person's likeness in a way that they don't approve of, or that's in like an adversarial kind of way. But I think the companies are way more at risk there than the person, because like everyone is going to side with the person in that instance. They're going to have a lot of like support, I would imagine. And so what happens to like a campaign or a show or a series that people know is now not the person that they actually support? Like they're going to tune that out immediately. So, I think we'll have to see what happens. But like, I go to see right now, at least like my favorite directors and my favorite actresses and actors, because of who they are. And if if it's just some sort of like AI mask, I really kind of dampens my enthusiasm to go support that, so we'll have to see.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Um, yeah, I think lastly too, and this is something we've sort of been getting at, I feel like the whole time, obviously, because we are marketers.
Yeah.
And I think this is something we were getting at when you were talking about how the whole company is probably not going to be, doing this Creator GTM, but like it's probably going to
Mhm.
stay within the marketing sector. I think it'll be more popularized probably, but like, yeah, I don't imagine non-marketers will be like, or people at least not interested in marketing or creating will be doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
I know that there's this temptation in B2B for like and I strongly support like when you can get real SMEs, subject matter experts, real practitioners to kind of be the face of like the content and to kind of really inform the content. That is what's best. But I think like being realistic, I think marketing will be the department that like has to have their hands on the reins for this strategy. Like marketing will be the department that kind of takes I think like the reputational risk of proposing this and pushing this forward. I think marketing also is obviously the department that stands to benefit the most from this strategy,
yes, definitely.
because it's mostly, again, it really mostly comes down to like, why do this? It's purely just because, uh, and if you don't believe this, don't do it. But it's purely just because we think our customers' attention is shifting in this way, and we still want to get in front of them in the way, in the way that matches their behavior. So if they're interacting more with individuals, then we will invest in creator relationships just because of that reason. And so that is marketing's like lifeblood. That's marketing's bread and butter. That's what we show up concerned about and care about like every day. So, but I also think like you should also expect to see and will see marketers kind of maybe taking like we'll take the first shift here of like of actually being the creators in a lot of cases too. And by that I mean like we will sort of work with subject matter experts or work with the sort of speaker heads for these programs and be very very hands on. Like we may in some cases be the creators ourselves. I think that that's obviously best when we're selling into marketers, right? So like I post frequently, especially recently on social media for that reason, but I don't think a marketer has to only sell into marketers in order to build up their kind of audience themselves. But I
Yeah.
definitely think like, I don't think if you sell FP&A software, you should expect your CFO to take the reins on this. I think you have to take the reins as the marketing team, and you have to set them up like we do, for instance, with our CEO, where it's very turnkey. So this person, this creator, so to speak, this individual we're going to rely on for the content, it's all turnkey. They have to do a limited number of things, and mostly, hopefully, the most important thing they do is they bring the ideas, like meaning they bring the opinions and the experience. But you can set them up with like, hey, we based off of like an interview with you or based off of getting to know you and hearing your opinions internally, we've set up some questions that we'd love for you to answer. You can leave feedback on these, or you can help us like script it just a little bit by sharing comments and so on and so on. And then all you have to do is show up and record, or we'll do maybe an interview and turn that into a lot of like text content. But it has to be super, super turnkey. It almost certainly has to involve someone that's like a good representative of your ICP, your customer that you're trying to reach. But don't expect for a lot of people to want to or to be able to take on the content creation. I actually think like as different as this is, it will definitely keep some like really tried and true aspects of content marketing, which is like talk to somebody that knows what they're talking about and then do the content side of it, like take their ideas and turn it into something formatted in a way that's going to work as marketing, right? So yeah, maybe this is like obvious, but I don't think that people should expect for this shift to happen if it's not being driven really by the marketing team,
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's actually like a positive thing for marketers. I feel like there's like maybe some feeling of unease recently in the marketing world, just of like, if everyone's a creator, then what am what am I? What is my value? And also like with, you know, AI writing and AI starting to be able to create better videos. It's like, okay, well, like, what do I, like, am I going to be replaced? And like, I think this is one of those things where you can point to and be like, no, this is actually like a perfect opportunity for you to jump on and like make sure that your value is seen.
Yes.
Yes. So I
Raise
think it's
your
a
hand
great
for it,
opportunity.
basically.
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the TLDR is like, and all of us are kind of collectively doing next year planning. I think the TLDR is to like take a look at the landscape of your industry, like your market. Do you personally notice? Do customers talk about individuals, or is it kind of obvious and apparent that people are following individuals in your space to learn and grow in their careers from them? How could this play a role in your marketing? Like what are some ideas that immediately spring to mind of like, oh, we've got this salesperson internally that just like is so great at educating customers. They're almost like an evangelist already. They're just not really doing it in like a structured way. Or our CEO has like so many awesome opinions that she shares internally in memos and emails and Slack posts, and we've never turned it into content before. Like just get some early ideas, take a look around. And then I think, you know, see where you could start, like see where you could test and experiment and build some rapport internally of like, we're gonna, you know, we're not gonna come in next year and kind of throw everything out the window. We're just gonna add this to our marketing mix. We're gonna try it out. Here's kind of the evidence we see for this. Here's kind of like the performance we expect, you know, in the early days. Give yourself some runway, give yourself some time, you know, have hopefully a marketing leader that can back you on that, because I do think it will take a little bit of time to learn. And then just see where things go. I think that's where we're at. I would say if you see any opinions on LinkedIn or elsewhere, that's like throw out your blog and everyone's an influencer and la da da. I think we're just getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. I do think though, like you don't want to be caught like having this convo a year from now when maybe this has become more commonplace and you've kind of missed that window of opportunity where it wasn't as common. So yeah, now I think is a great time to ask a couple questions, to experiment. And I think come in with enthusiasm, but maybe temper your enthusiasm too. We all have a lot to learn about how this is going to work, you know?
Definitely. Yes. We will be humbled, all of us at some point. Even if it goes really well, there's, like we were saying with our situation, bottlenecks, and figuring out how to make it work is its own battle. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah. It's the sleeves rolled period of this whole shift. So let's just get the sleeves rolled first, and we'll all reconvene when our hands are actually dirty and we've done some work, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I think that's about it. Give Creator GTM a try. Start writing your LinkedIn posts for you and your founder. We are here every week. Thanks for watching. This has been The Shortcut, and we will be back next week. Please come watch, subscribe. Also, let us know in the comments, what do you want us to talk about? We're always willing to chat about what interests you. So let us know. Greg, it's been real.
It has. Take care. I'll see you.